I thought hiring a tutor for Bella would be a simple fix, better grades, fewer sleepless nights, and maybe a little less worry pressing on my chest. When Jack arrived at my doorstep on a rain-soaked afternoon, I had no idea how much more he would bring with him. He stood there, drenched yet undeterred, a worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder, wearing a navy sweater that clung slightly to his frame. He was younger than I expected, yet there was a calmness about him, a quiet gravity that made the storm outside feel almost irrelevant. When he smiled, it was as if the entire house exhaled, like it had been holding its breath for far too long. "Good evening, Mrs. Lawson," he said, his voice low, reassuring. "I'm Jack. Thank you for having me." His handshake was firm but warm, and for the briefest moment, I felt something stir inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. I convinced myself it was nothing, just relief that Bella was finally getting the help she needed. But as Jack stepped inside, shedding the rain like a second skin, his presence seemed to ripple through every corner of my lonely home. What I didn't realize then was that Jack wasn't just stepping into my living room. He was stepping into the hollow spaces of my life, the quiet, forgotten places where dreams once lived. And somewhere between the faint ticking of the kitchen clock and the soft patter of rain against the windows, I had the strangest, most dangerous thought. Maybe Bella wasn't the only one who needed saving. At first, Jack's presence blended seamlessly into our routine. 2 evenings a week, he and Bella would settle at the kitchen table, heads bowed over textbooks, laughter occasionally breaking through the stillness. I told myself I was simply grateful to hear life again echo through the halls instead of the lonely hum of appliances. But little by little, something began to shift. I would find myself lingering nearby, pretending to tidy up, though my hands moved slower than my ears. It wasn't just what Jack said, it was how he said it. His voice was calm, steady, like a river smoothing the rough edges of a stone. He never rushed Bella, never made her feel small for stumbling. It was a kind of patience I hadn't realized I was starving for. Sometimes I caught fleeting glimpses of him, how he tapped his fingers rhythmically when thinking, how his smile softened when Bella grasped a difficult concept, and shamefully how he would glance across the room when he thought I wasn't looking. A glance not at the mess or the aging wallpaper, but at me. After the divorce, I had gotten used to silence, to living like a ghost in my own home. Jack's laughter, light and unforced, floated through the air, settling into forgotten corners, breathing life back into spaces I had long abandoned. And without meaning to, without trying, Jack was teaching me something Bella's textbooks never could. How it felt to be seen again. How it felt to be remembered. It happened on a night when the rain came harder than it had in months, drumming against the roof like a restless heartbeat. Bella had gone to bed early, worn out from a long day. Jack lingered in the kitchen, his books packed away, but neither of us made a move toward the door. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the silence deep and humming between us. Or maybe it was simply time. I brewed tea without thinking, the simple ritual grounding me, my hands trembling only slightly as I set 2 cups between us. The steam curled upward, a fragile bridge across the distance we had so carefully maintained. Jack looked at me then, not the way a student looks at a parent, but the way one lost soul looks at another. His eyes were steady, searching. And then he asked, his voice a low, reverent murmur, "Do you ever feel like you're not living the life you were meant to live?" The question hit harder than any storm outside. It broke through my carefully built walls, slipping into the places I thought were sealed off forever. I opened my mouth, but no words came at first. I just stared at him, feeling every beat of my heart like a drum against my ribs. Finally, almost too softly to hear, I whispered, "Sometimes. But mostly." Jack didn't flinch. He just nodded, the corners of his mouth tightening as if he understood more than I dared admit even to myself. In that moment, something unspoken passed between us. Not attraction, not desire, something deeper. Recognition. A silent acknowledgement of the loneliness we both carried. Of the dreams we had folded away and forgotten how to unfold. And without saying another word, we sat there, 2 cups of untouched tea cooling between us, as the rain washed the world clean outside. After that night, something between Jack and me shifted. Subtle, invisible, but undeniable. We still played our parts. He was the patient tutor, Bella the eager student, and I the watchful mother moving through the motions of domestic life. But beneath the surface, the air between us had changed. There were glances that lasted a breath too long. Soft smiles shared over the clatter of pencils and the rustle of notebook pages. Moments when our hands brushed accidentally. Brief touches that sent sparks dancing up my spine. I told myself it was foolish, dangerous even. That whatever stirred inside me needed to be tucked away. Buried deep where it could do no harm. But the heart has a will of its own. One evening, Bella asked if she could stay overnight at a friend's house. I agreed without thinking, grateful perhaps for the space, though I barely understood why. When Jack arrived that night, he looked around and noticed immediately. The house was quieter, emptier, more exposed. "She's not home tonight," I said casually, my voice steadier than I felt. He hesitated at the threshold, the flicker of a decision crossing his face. Then, setting his bag carefully by the door, he smiled, small, almost shy, and said, "Then maybe I can stay for a little while." It was nothing. It was everything. I made tea again, a ritual now tinged with an electric charge neither of us dared name. We sat across from each other, the lamp casting a golden pool of light between us, the outside world forgotten. We talked of harmless things at first. Favorite books, secret dreams, the kind of laughter that comes easy and leaves a lingering ache. But inevitably the conversation circled back. To that night. To that question. And as Jack leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper, I knew that the distance between us wasn't just closing. It was collapsing. And neither of us seemed willing or able to stop it. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, the kind that hung heavy in the stillness, trembling just beyond reach. Jack's fingers tapped absently against the ceramic mug. A steady rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. Across the table, his gaze found mine. And this time, neither of us looked away. "I've been thinking about what you said that night," I murmured, the words tasting both terrifying and inevitable on my tongue. "About living the life I was meant to live." He leaned in slightly, just enough for the soft light to catch the golden flecks in his eyes. His voice a low hum vibrating against the fragile air between us. "And what did you realize?" he asked, almost afraid to disturb the delicate thread binding us together. I swallowed, my hands tightening around the warmth of the mug. I forgot how," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper, cracking with the weight of unshed dreams. For a heartbeat the world stood still. Then slowly, carefully, Jack reached across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. A touch so light it could have been mistaken for an accident. But it wasn't. It was deliberate. It was a question. It was a lifeline. I felt the shiver race through me, unbidden, uncontrollable. Something deep inside me, a place long buried under years of caution and quiet ache, stirred awake. "You deserve more," Jack said, his voice fierce and trembling all at once. "More than survival. More than loneliness." And in that moment I saw not just a man sitting across from me, but a mirror reflecting back the woman I had almost forgotten I was. A woman who still wanted. A woman who still could be wanted. Without thinking, I turned my hand under his, letting our palms meet skin to skin. And just like that, the walls I had so carefully built cracked open, letting in the very thing I had feared most, and longed for the deepest. Connection. Hope. And the first trembling notes of something dangerously, achingly alive. The touch of his hand against mine was featherlight, yet it sent a current rippling through my entire body, awakening every part of me I thought had long gone silent. Jack stood slowly, never breaking our gaze, as if afraid that any sudden movement would shatter the fragile trust hanging between us. He circled the table, each step deliberate, his presence closing the last slivers of distance between us. When he knelt down in front of me, it wasn't grand or dramatic. It was tender. It was real. His hands, warm and trembling slightly, cupped my face with a reverence that stole my breath. And in the softest, aching voice, he whispered, "You are beautiful." His thumbs brushed away the tears I hadn't realized were forming. "You are strong. And you deserve to feel alive again." The honesty in his words cracked something open so deep inside me, it left me gasping. Not from fear, but from the terrifying, thrilling recognition that I believed him. I lifted my hand, threading my fingers gently through his hair, feeling the softness, the humanity, the vulnerability of him. He closed his eyes and leaned into my touch, as if he too had been starving for this, for connection, for the permission to simply feel. When our lips met, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't hurried. It was slow, careful, an exploration rather than a conquest. A silent promise sealed in the gentlest of kisses. Jack's hands cradled my cheeks as though I were something precious, irreplaceable. And in that quiet, tender moment, every piece of me that had once been fractured slowly began to knit itself back together. There were no fireworks, no dramatic crescendos. Only the profound, shattering beauty of being truly seen. Truly held. We moved together naturally, bodies aligning not out of lust, but out of something far rarer, trust. Healing. The years of loneliness, of second-guessing, of silent ache melted away under his touch. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I let go, falling not into emptiness, but into something real, something terrifyingly, beautifully alive. Jack didn't rescue me. He simply reminded me that I was still worth saving. Morning crept in slowly, slipping through the sheer curtains in soft, golden threads. I awoke to the steady, reassuring rhythm of Jack's breathing. His arm wrapped securely around my waist as if even in sleep, he wasn't willing to let me go. For a few precious moments I stayed there. Still cocooned, pretending that the outside world, with all its demands and doubts, didn't exist. Here in the hush of a new dawn it was just us. Simple. Whole. But reality, patient and inevitable, began to whisper at the edges of my mind. The soft ping of a notification on my phone. The ticking of the wall clock. The distant memory of responsibilities waiting just beyond these four safe walls. I shifted carefully, trying not to wake him. But the moment my body pulled away, his hand reached for me instinctively, fingertips brushing my arm with a sleepy, possessive tenderness. "You're not running away, are you?" he murmured, his voice thick with sleep and something deeper, something raw. I turned to look at him, a soft smile tugging at my lips even as my chest tightened. "No," I whispered, "just thinking." He pushed himself up onto one elbow, studying me in the muted light. His eyes, so open, so steady, searched mine without judgment. "About what?" he asked. I hesitated, the words sticking to the walls of my throat. How could I explain it? The fear coiled tight in my chest. The fear not of Jack, but of daring to hope again. Of risking this fragile, precious thing we had begun to build. "I'm scared," I said finally, my voice cracking under the weight of honesty. Jack's face softened instantly. "Of me?" he asked gently. I shook my head, reaching out to touch his knee, grounding myself in the solid, living proof of him. "Of what this means," I breathed. "Of what comes next." He reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine without hesitation. "We don't have to have all the answers right now," he said, his voice a soothing balm against the storm inside me. "One step at a time. That's all we have to do. One step." Sounded so simple. And yet, it felt like the bravest thing I had ever agreed to. In the days that followed, life did not change with a grand flourish. There were no dramatic declarations, no sweeping gestures. Only small moments, simple, quiet, and yet somehow more profound than anything I had ever known. Jack continued to come by for Bella's lessons, slipping seamlessly into the rhythm of our home. But now there was something more between us. Something tender and electric thrumming just beneath the surface. A brush of fingertips as we passed in the hallway. A glance held a second too long across the kitchen counter. The way our smiles grew softer, deeper, every time our eyes found each other. It was in the stolen moments after Bella went upstairs to do her homework, when Jack and I would linger at the kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. It was in the way he would rest his hand briefly at the small of my back as he reached for a plate, sending shivers cascading down my spine with the lightest touch. We were careful, deliberate. Not because we were unsure, but because what we were building deserved patience. It deserved reverence. And somewhere between algebra problems and late-night cups of tea, Jack became more than Bella's tutor. He became part of us, part of the fabric of our lives. I laughed more, worried less, and slowly, piece by piece, I started trusting the world again. Not because it had become less dangerous, but because Jack had shown me that even in a world full of uncertainty, there could still be moments of breathtaking beauty. There could still be kindness. There could still be love, gentle, steady, and real. And perhaps most healing of all, he reminded me that I wasn't too late, that I wasn't too broken, that even after all the years of surviving, I was still capable of choosing joy. The weeks melted into months, each day stitching itself into a quiet, beautiful tapestry of small, precious moments. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, the kind sung about in ballads or painted in grand, sweeping gestures. It was something quieter, something stronger. Jack and I built our world one glance, one touch, one shared laugh at a time. There were no promises scribbled in haste, no fairy tales rushed into under the blush of infatuation. Just two people choosing over and over again to show up, to reach across the fear, to say yes to something imperfect but profoundly real. Jack continued tutoring Bella, his laughter and patience filling the rooms that had once felt so hollow. In time he became part of our family. Not through declarations, but through the steady, tender constancy of love lived daily. There were still moments when doubt whispered at the edges of my mind, old fears stirring from the corners where they had long slept. But all I had to do was look at him, at the gentle curve of his smile, the steady warmth of his hand in mine, and I remembered. Happiness didn't have to arrive in a blaze of perfection. It didn't have to look like it did in the stories we were told as children. Sometimes it came quietly, softly, unexpectedly, in the steady thrum of a heart beating beside yours, in the way a hand fits perfectly into yours across a kitchen table. One evening as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in strokes of fire and gold, Jack reached for my hand. His thumb brushed slow, reassuring circles against my skin, anchoring me to this moment. To him. To us. "You changed my life, you know," he said. His voice a tender caress against the growing hush of twilight. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from a swelling, overwhelming gratitude. "You changed mine too," I whispered. He smiled then, the kind of smile that promises everything without needing a single word. This is just the beginning," he murmured, leaning to press a kiss to my temple, as the stars blinked to life above us. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime I believed him. Not in a naive, reckless way, but with the quiet, grounded certainty that the best stories aren't the ones that sweep you off your feet. They're the ones that teach you how to stand, how to open your arms wide, and how to choose love again. One beautiful, imperfect step at a time.